with the blood clots. I said, well, Doc, I don't think it's right, but if you got this from your parents, as if this was hereditary, then that means all your years of drinking.
He used to play guitar while unconscious from his own blood-wrecked hotel and was intoxicated behind the stage. Ozzy Osbourne's chambers, just to go back later and tidy up everything as if there was never any incident. Zakk Wylde isn't simply a guitarist, he's amazing. American heavy metal's roaring spirit for more than 30 years, yet he is now in his 50s. Zakk no longer enters the stage wearing a Jack's bottle in his hand, but with a guitar, solemn eyes, and a pure heart that was originally Dimebag Darrell's. A guy who once survived on the cries of a Marshall amp now converses with God in private. He continues to wear leather every morning. Despite his wild beard, he slowed down as though completely cognizant of the cost of again. Zakk Wylde didn't go too far. Descent to scandal was not absorbed by fame as he decided not to get up and move forward, and as a result, he has turned into an uncommon character in the metal community. A warrior with a spirit that knew when to stop, never turned his back on his departed brothers, and a dad, spouse, and friend without acting like one. This isn't a story only about a rock star who made it through, but on a spirit that was once lost in the dark and is now to walk in the light is not to be commended. However, to demonstrate that genuine strength doesn't, the secret is to remain faithful. Jeffrey Phillips' early life and identity. On January 14, 1967, Vant was born in Bayonne, New Jersey, is a working-class community. An unexpected industrial town among the most unique guitarists to surface in the 1980s, his family was of Polish heritage and led a simple existence, not impoverished enough to be hungry, but far from possessing funds for Black or Marshall amplifiers tickets for the Sabbath. His father, Jerome, grew living in an orphanage, something Zakk doesn't often do talks about in public, but everyone recognizes his quietness and toughness. Mannerisms originate from Zakk's during childhood. There was a calm, the kind of loneliness that plagues children devoted to music but without somebody to tell it to. At the age of 8, he picked up his first guitar before giving it up at the age of 14. And he didn't let go this time. Zakk started playing the guitar as if it were on certain days. He played the sole remaining path for a continuous 12 hours till his fingers bleeding asleep in class, his thoughts devoured by vibrating strings and notes. Zakk played sports while other children did. Shut himself in the garage and began to play back repeatedly, playing the same solo until his numb hands weren't caused by anyone compelled him, not because he had a dream about being famous. He simply thought he had a justification for existing when the guitar was among. Little Zakk had to go to school through it out of obligation, but it was there that he initially experienced what it was like to stand before a crowd at a school performance. Performs with a crappy guitar and wide-eyed of nerves and defiance. Those performances weren't successful. They taught Zakk one, but anyone can shout. Essential if you wish to be heard. Your instrument must make a strong statement. Following graduation from Jackson Memorial, Zakk works at a New Jersey high school, a supermarket, while having fun in the neighborhood. Zayas, a band. At this time he started going by Zakk Wylde as his stage moniker. Short Wylde and the kind is a self-made name. You must inquire twice since nobody understands how to spell. Zakk's early years didn't cause significant disruptions, although each one truth was instilled by each day. If no light is emanating from the outside, would construct a fire on his own, and the guitar from a dead item over time turned into the element that characterized both the Zakk Wylde's identity and fate. No one instructed him in the art of creating art, but by means of constant repetition and an infatuation with each note he discovered how to live and avoid looking back too soon. Career in New Jersey in the 1980s. Zakk. Nobody paid any attention to the name Wylde. He was a member of the little band Zayas, playing at local taverns with an elderly Les Paul Gibson hung over his shoulder, riffing while standing in the backdrop. No spotlight behind the lead vocalist praise despite the fact that no one was looking. Zakk used everything he owned to play, including if there were just 3 inebriated men I would continue to play as if I were opening there. For Madison Square's Black Sabbath, it wasn't arrogance, Garden once remarked. It was the type of mentality that creates an otherwise hopeless musical voyage a turn. When Jake E. Lee departed in 1987, a silent search for Ozzy Osbourne's band started. To take his position, one of Zakk's previous guitar instructors advised him to send a sample. Sharon Osbourne received the tape. Featured a brief solo and just a few riffs. And a few scratchy vocals without any production polish, but it was sufficient to convince Ozzy. He halted abruptly because of something in Zakk's unfettered, raw performance, but accurate enough that Australians couldn't ignore their initial encounter. Proceeded as a scene from a rock movie I was actually in. Zakk remembered, trembling like a leaf, he'd play, and I was hardly able to raise my however, following only a few notes. Ozzy replied, turning to Sharon, he's the within a few months. Zakk, the quiet a blonde teen who recently left an unidentified band, became Ozzy Osbourne's new official a guitarist, taking over the role once populated by icons such as Randy Rhoads and Jake E. Lee. They released their debut album in 1988. No Rest for the Wicked together. What? Zakk's contribution wasn't a copy, but rather a razor-sharp and a very unique style, riffs, lyrical but fiery solos, and above all, a deep regard for Ozzy's. Zakk ventured into music in less than 2 years. From a local guitarist with no name to one of the brightest fresh faces in American metal, but what distinguishes him wasn't merely skill, it was feeling. Whenever he stood next to Ozzy, Zakk didn't merely play, he lived it, bled, and acted as though he were giving his own goodbye, and going forward, Zakk Wylde's profession was no longer a solitary one. Grind in a chilly garage, it was incorporated into a narrative in which a young New Jerseyan was trusted to deliver the last scream of a Zakk Wylde's career breakthrough. Formally joined the ranks of heavy, the best guitarists in metal, when he 1988 saw the release of No Rest for the Wicked. With Ozzy Osbourne, nobody at the time was familiar with this fiery blonde. The musician would remain by the prince of long periods in darkness, but Zakk was there, given his harsh, gritty playing style and a ghost of compromise who dies before assisted Ozzy in navigating the challenging time after the passing of Jake's departure and Randy Rhoads. Lee's No More Tears album from 1991 marked a significant turning point in Zakk's career. Was the first time he assumed a more significant position in the composition of the song, and his playing the guitar was no longer merely a substitute. It turned become the new spirit of the solo in the title track, No, by the band. More Tears was a furious guitar statement. And eerie like the scream of a broken soul. Mama, I'm caught between heaven and hell. The lone ballad on the album is Coming Home, demonstrated Zakk's capacity for tenderness. Similar to a youngster missing his mother, he worked with Ozzy and co-wrote that tune. Provide one of the most emotionally hits that resonated throughout his career after Zakk received an invitation to join Osmosis in 1995. Roses and Guns will take Slash's place, but finally said no because he didn't want to leave Ozzy with that decision made public. Anything fundamental to Zakk's personality, devotion to the man who had faith in him even if it meant transferring greater notoriety. Zakk was still aware that if he didn't construct, he would live forever with something of his own. In the shadow of another person, that's when BLS, or the Black Label Society, was Zakk, who was born in 1998, started BLS not to rival, but to establish a universe in which he might be who he truly was. The band represented similar to Zakk, the music is raw, untamed, and roaring. Sonic Brew, their debut album, wasn't an enormous commercial success, but it established the basis for a BLS culture that is cult-like, accepted by metalheads everywhere through albums such as 2000 Stronger Than Death, Eternal, 1919, Mafia, 2002, Order, 2005, In the Black, 2010. Race. Zakk did more than merely serve, he was the lead guitarist and singer. Soul, the creator of The Map, the leader of In the Whole Empire. The memory-ridden tune In This River Darrell's Penny Bag turned into an unspoken anthem about grief and fraternity within among the metal scene. Zakk's special talent. In spite of his aggressive music, he always had depth in his emotions. Songs such as Spread the Wheel or Dead As You could sense the spirit of a man who has endured storms. While carrying Zakk's wounds could only be healed by music. Halt at BLS. He introduced Zakk in 2014. Sabbath is a group devoted to Black Sabbath classics are being reinterpreted in this wasn't merely a compliment to his own style. Act was Zakk's method of paying tribute to his roots while introducing the sound of Sabbath. Then in 2022, nearer to a new generation, a startling announcement rocked the Zakk Wylde was selected to step into the metal scene. Anticipation for Pantera's reunion with Dimebag Darrell lineup with Anthrax's Charlie Bonanti, Rex Brown and Phil Anelmo. This wasn't a living memorial to the new Panta, where Zakk used Dime's real guitar to perform with longtime tech veteran Dime's Grady Champion on board to maintain the original audio quality. For Zakk, this wasn't a high point in your career. Holy obligation. He never made an effort to be Dime-aged. All he wanted to do was the legacy of his comrade. Zakk Wylde doesn't possess an album at the top of the Billboard charts. Doesn't play hit songs all the time. However, his fan base is fervently devoted. From motorcycle riders to veterans of war and underground young loners who see rockers themselves in the grim crevices of BLS, he didn't start a fad. Instead, he an impregnable stronghold. A residence for thee in a world where everything is lost. Zakk Wylde is interchangeable and stays exactly who he is. Not a stand-in for, replaced a storyteller and a warrior with a guitar and a soul that will always be connected with metal in a unique manner. Duplicate one's own life when people consider Zakk Wylde, who has a wild beard, hefty sledgehammer, torn leather vests, guitars and a fierce roar that few can imagine that a man is hiding behind that angry picture of a single, genuine love in the rock industry and roll, where marriages frequently fail. Zakk Wylde smashed guitars on stage. Is the uncommon exception. He wed his Barbaren Wylde, a high school sweetheart, and has always been by her side. Since the 8th grade, when Zakk first encountered Barbaren early in life, when he was still performing in shabby practice spaces all over quietly, she was the one from New Jersey. Managing logistics behind the scenes, bringing water to make up for the small gig money without ever requesting credit. Didn't develop feelings for a rock star, she fell in love with a child who had just a guitar and a pledge. I'll do everything in my power to the Zakk fulfilled that pledge at the end. Not with fame, but with steadfast devotion. They wed in the latter part of the 1980s and have 4 Haley Ray Jesse John and their children together. Halen, Michael Rodas, Michael Hicks, and Sabbath Page. Just their names tell the depth of Zakk's passion for music. Each one honors the legends he reveres. Randy Hendrix, Jimmy, Eddie Van Halen, and however, Rodas, Jimmy Page and Tony Iommi. Zakk's family is not an idolatry. He can only return home there, and when Barbaren takes off his war armor, he is more. She is not only his spouse, but also his manager, road companion for each tour, as well as the first to recognize when his health started to decline. Steep drop in 2009 when Zakk's blood suddenly appeared. The cause of the clots in his legs and lungs was she. Doctors who hurried him to the hospital cautioned that if he kept drinking, he might pass away. Zakk, who used to breathe after drinking, who considered Jack Daniels to be the only disinfectant, completely gave up alcohol after inherent fear. It was a choice that was far from simple yet vitally important for music. For himself and his family since then, Zakk has changed to a healthier diet and lifestyle. Clean, engaging in weightlifting, meditation, and reading the Bible each morning as well. Still wears black and plays metal. Continues to yell on stage, but behind you may discover him sitting calmly, shut in prayer or phoning his spouse. There are no tales of a hasty rock star fling. Zakk dated the model for a little time before to Barbaren. Susie Owens, but severed all connections later. In more than 3 decades, his name has never been involved in a family dispute. Zakk works in a field filled with lost souls. Decided to remain motionless and cling to the hand that has accompanied him from the starting. I'm a New York acolyte. Zakk once jokingly said, Yankees fan, but I'm more devoted to my spouse than to my team. Under the comedy, there's a unique philosophy of life. A man can yell into a sea of unfamiliar people, but upon returning home he still requires a place to rest in peace. He puts his instrument down and leans his head against the shoulder of the person he most trusts. Zakk Wylde, nothing has changed there. Zakk Wylde's legacy and impact didn't make his imprint just by snarling, screaming riffs with pinch harmonics that reverberated like nighttime howls, or his massive body slouched over a guitar following each performance. He left something more profound, the picture of a metal warrior who lived life to the fullest, not for fame, for fashion, but out of devotion to music and the individuals inside the guitar. Zakk Wylde is an iconic figure in the world. He isn't the most sophisticated technically, neither the most inventive nor the player innovator, but not many are able to create such an individualized guitar tone that allows you only need one to identify him. Take note of the strange sound he produced. Profound turned into a distinctive look that impacted generations in a variety of disciplines, from gloom southern rock to groove metal to contemporary. Zakk is also one of the few heavy artists who are widely admired around the frequently polarized Australian metal community. Lovers of Black Sabbath and Pantera, BLS diehards or loyalists, they might not they share, but they all agree on everything. One feeling, a nod, a shrug, and a straightforward Zakk is the best, as he's never deceived anyone on a more profound level. It's Zakk's lifestyle, which characterizes his legacy in an exit-heavy industry, tactics for changing allegiance. And artists who are prepared to part up everything for Zakk, paid attention and persevered through. When wandering by yourself and giving up drinking or living differently from his surroundings are evidence that you can be a passionate artist and a loyal husband, a kind parent, and a faithful buddy who remains when things become tough. And maybe Zakk Wylde's the best legacy is not found in records such as Doom Crew or the No More Tears Mafia. However, with his indispensable presence on stage, in which he performs more than just guitar but conveys the idea that metal is not only sound, but also loyalty, bravery, and unwavering conviction. What constitutes a true for Zakk Wylde metal legend is the solution. Perhaps he never made an effort to become one. He only remained loyal to himself, and that was sufficient. Life now, even if I'm 58 years old. Old Zakk Wylde doesn't seem to be slowing down. He has actually been spotted in 2024 and 2025. Possibly at his most vivacious and energetic state since turning 50, not only performance while respecting the traditions he grown up fighting with, and now keeps on carrying on. The focal point of Zakk's present endeavors is the current Panta tour, and enormous. In 2022, a worldwide homage was launched to honor Dimebag Darrell, a former member of the band, and Zakk and Pantera in 2025, with Vinnie Paul keep taking this excursion to the north. The largest stages in America, from Tampa and Philadelphia to Santa Clara and Denver, using the real guitar of Dimebag. Zakk is performing more than simply music. He's bringing back memories for fans who previously lamented Panta's passing and now stand in front of the stage crying for an appearance that feels unique yet sincere and passionate. Highly deserving, Zakk is simultaneously one of the experience's major performers. The 2025 Hendrix Tour is a national tour. Commemoration of one of his early years, Jimi Heroes Hendrix, during March through April of 2025 throughout dozens of U.S. cities and Canada. Guitar legends are on the trip. Similar to Eric Johnson and Kenny Wayne Shepherd, Zakk, however, has been among the most talked about performances because of his unique aesthetic that draws inspiration from not only method, but rock and roll without any filters. Zakk continues to be the frontman in the meanwhile of his tribute band, Zakk Sabbath. In late 2024 and early 2025, Black Sabbath. They went on a U.S. tour in 2025 on the King of the Monsters circuit. In addition to Honor behaves similarly to the Iron Maidens and Zoso in the beginning of 2025. Zakk Sabbath maintained their travel from Manchester to other cities in Europe, Berlin, performing well-known covers such as NIB War Pigs and Iron Man. As a tribute to Zakk, respectfully refers to Tony Iommi as the heavy metal's father. In addition to that, Zakk published an e-album called Top Riffs featuring Zakk Sabbath. Collection of popular covers. The album has gotten positive reviews not only by ardent supporters, but also as a significant commemorating more than 30 years of Zakk's, perhaps the most vibrant of the Sabbath flames. Zakk's 2025 emotional moment will be involvement in the Black Sabbath's The Final concert is set for July 5, 2025 in Birmingham's Villa Park. This momentous performance signifies the complete reunion between Tony Iommi Geyser and Ozzy Osbourne, Bill Ward and Butler. After over 2 Zakk hasn't been a formal member of Sabbath, but his request to play at this final evening demonstrates how profoundly he is interwoven with the band's spiritual legacy. Zakk spends his time when he's not on tour spending time with his wife at home in California along with their 4 kids. Barbaran keeps avoiding transient temptation